We will now proceed with the first presentation on unpacking the complexities of tech abuse, understanding definitional and conceptual issues, and the perspectives of those who harm in a domestic violence context. Nikos Koukopoulos, he is a research fellow with the Tech and Gender and Tech team at UCL London and is involved in research seeking to conceptualize tech abuse within intimate partner violence contexts and understand perpetration pathways. Welcome, Nikos.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Hopefully you can all see my slides now. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikos Koukopoulos. I'm a research fellow at University College London's Gender and Tech Research Lab. Our lab is looking at the intersection of technology, security, and gender, but very much our focus is on technology-facilitated abuse, or tech abuse, as we call it. So we approach tech abuse from different angles, from a technical perspective to a more theoretical and psychological perspective. So we know that broadly, TFA is described as a misuse of technology to coerce, harass, or abuse. But in what we found essentially was that there are many different definitions, and often they expand further than the intimate partner domestic abuse domains, and we have both narrow and broad definitions. We also have plenty of terms and abbreviations in this field, as well as various measurement tools. I should say that now I started describing our first study, which is essentially a study we completed last year in relation to, it's an expert study to understand the conceptualization and definition of tech abuse. And later on, I will discuss more about our current project, which is related to accounts of tech abuse perpetrators. So going back to the study, because we identified all these problems in terms of how we understand and define tech abuse, we decided to do the study to really understand how tech abuse is defined and conceptualized. So this was essentially a Delphi study to reach an agreement on this. And we conducted initially a literature review where we reviewed several papers on tech abuse. And after this, we invited more than 1,500 experts from academia, governmental and intergovernmental bodies, the third sector, as well as industry, to complete 3 rounds of surveys. This is an illustration of what the process looked like. So we started by the literature review, and really what we tried to do there is collect terms, tech abuse terms, abbreviations, definitions, associated concepts, and measurements, but also we extracted names from the papers to really make this pool of experts that we subsequently invited to the surveys, the 3 rounds of surveys. So the first round was an open-ended round where we asked experts to come up with terms, abbreviations, definitions, and concepts they use in their work, but also they're aware of. And we had 181 experts. And this was followed by the second round, which was a quantitative round where we had essentially ranking exercises, and we asked participants to rank different elements of the terms, the definitions, and the concepts. And then we had a third round where we essentially used as a way of confirming the results and asking the experts again about some of the items that we did not reach an agreement on in the second round. So if I can start with the findings, the most common definition cited by the expert was this offered by UN Women and WHO joint program on violence against women data. So as we can see, it's a great definition, but it's a quite general definition. Um, but overall, we have 149 different terms to describe tech abuse. And this included 512 unique terms mentioned by survey respondents. Um, so many of these terms were variations of technology facilitated abuse, but it was interesting to see how they would use different words to describe, for example, the role of technology, and this included uh, technology facilitated, enabled, assisted, mediated, dependent, and so on. Um, and in terms of measurement, we identified 81 measurement tools, and the most common is the technology abuse in relationship scales by Brown and Hegarty, but we also had CDAC, which was the second most popular. In terms of terminology, we identified only 12 non-English terms in the literature, but this was related to the fact that we essentially only reviewed English language literature. But then when we asked the experts, they came out with 144 different terms in 19 different languages. And here you can see some of those terms in all sorts of language, including French, German, Brazilian, Portuguese, and so on. Um, so the most preferred term overall was technology facilities abuse, but still only 17.3% opted for this, and others chose different options. And this kind of goes to show again the fragmentation in the field and how many kind of different terms are preferred around here. We also asked about specific elements of the terminology. Um, so in terms of the prefix, and by prefix we essentially mean what word we use for the technology element. Um, Most people opted for technology, and this was followed by digital as what they're using or what they prefer in this field, and further followed by cyber or online. In terms of the role of technology, in the abuse, people seem to opt mainly for facilitated, but also enabled was second, and then assisted based was further down the list. And in terms of the scope of violence and abuse, a lot of participants, we knew from the first round that a lot of participants did not necessarily see the purpose of adding an additional term, but if a term was chosen, gender-based was most often placed first. But here we saw kind of quite a split, an even split between different terms. So we had gender-based against women and girls, against women, coercive control, and intimate partner. And actually, this was a category where things were more evenly split across the options. In terms of measurement, only a third of the participants were aware of measurement tools. And again, this might show that we're not quite sure where we're going with measurement and how to measure tech abuse. Um, the measure chosen most often was the TAR scale, as previously mentioned, but there were also some other scales mentioned here. Um, in terms of how tech abuse is conceptualized, we asked them, what do you think should guide our understanding of tech abuse? Um, and the four items that reached consensus were the impact as experienced by the victim survivor, the behavior of the perpetrator, the victim survivor's perception of harm, and the lack of consent. In terms of where TFA tends to happen, obviously we ask here to really understand where the boundaries of tech abuse are. And participants felt that it requires some perpetration through digital means. However, it can also be perpetrated offline, for example, by withholding someone's access to technology. It does not necessarily require a personal relationship, so it can be perpetrated against strangers or online. And it can also involve professional relationships, so it can happen within a workplace environment. Um, in terms of who is impacted and who perpetrates tech abuse, it's really any group that can be a victim, survivor, or perpetrator. But what we saw was that experts emphasized some less known aspects, and this included teens, adolescents as potential perpetrators, groups and communities as perpetrators and victim survivors, and institutions as perpetrators. It's interesting to note here that we also asked them whether children as perpetrators should be accounted, and this did not achieve consensus. And I think it's really interesting because it really shows that perhaps we don't know how to approach this area yet, or some people may consider that we need some different alternative terminology when we discuss perpetration of underage people and perpetration of tech abuse. And finally, here is so essentially we gave them a list of different concepts that we consider that may or may not fall within tech abuse, and we asked them, do you think these behaviors and phenomena are part of tech abuse? And what you can see here with black is the ones that achieve consensus. So over 75% of the participants thought that yes, this is tech abuse. Um, and I think there are some interesting things in here, such as, for example, catfishing and online trolling being considered tech abuse with quite high percentages, but also the items at the bottom with gray, where participants weren't too sure whether this is tech abuse or not. Obviously, with some of them, such as sexting or online pornography, we can clearly see how um, we are talking about behaviors that they can be fully legal and consensual, but they can also involve non-consensual material, and perhaps that's why we see that participants were rather undecided. So this was our Delphi study, and now I will talk about the current study we're undertaking based on accounts of perpetrators of tech abuse. And here, so we using a slightly narrower definition. So we're focused on technology facilitated domestic abuse. And what we mean by that is essentially tech abuse perpetrated within intimate partner environments, and it can involve harassment via calls and messages. It can involve cyber stalking, image-based abuse, abuse through home and smart home devices, Internet of Things, financial tech abuse, but also account hacking and impersonation. So just to give a bit of context, we know that tech abuse in the domestic context can extend and exacerbate the effects of coercive control. In the UK, we have some statistics saying that it was relevant to 32% of women and children who saw support from domestic abuse in 2022-2023. And when we look at cyber stalking, we see essentially 70% increase of cyber stalking from 2012 to 2020, and very much this is part of tech abuse. Um, so the reason we decided to do this study is because most of the research in this area is based on accounts of victim survivors, um, and frontline staff, but we have less understanding of the mindset of the perpetrators, what kind of technologies they opt for, and what is the thinking process behind this, their motivations and justifications for carrying out the abuse, how do they learn and develop their skills to commit tech abuse, but also any patterns that we may notice in how this is perpetrated. And there is a genuine question around why do research on tech abuse altogether? And I think the answer to this, the answer I have at least, is that it's really important to understand the offending process, what are the opportunities and obstacles presented to perpetrators, and so that we can start thinking about how we can actually disrupt these behaviors. And also, this includes apprehending the offenders where we can. But also, it's about understanding perpetrator justifications. What is their armor essentially? against recognizing that they may have misused technology, and how can we deal with it. We are doing this, we're conducting semi-structured interviews, focus groups, and observations with those who misuse technology within intimate relationships. And to do this, we're collaborating with Respect, which is a UK-based organization that offers services to male victim survivors of domestic abuse, but also is responsible for accrediting perpetrator programs. Um, and also we collaborate with several domestic abuse perpetrator programs, all based in the UK. Um, so far, we have been working across two DAPs in London, um, and one is based in London in Redbridge, and the other one is in Wales. And we have conducted focus group, 5 1-to-1 interviews, and observations of two group sessions on tech abuse. I should say here that we also try to essentially give back to the organizations we work with, and we offer them any training and insights on tech abuse. But we have also developed a tech abuse session prototype, which is essentially a standalone session of tech abuse that the services can consider incorporated into their perpetrator program. Um, so in terms of what we see so far, and I should stress this is preliminary findings. Um, so um, Obviously, this is a qualitative study, but there are behaviors that we tend to see more and less frequently. So it's interesting how harassment via calls and messages is almost in every case we see, as well as behaviors like checking the partner's phones, tablets, and so on. It's uh, quite common, unfortunately. And then we tend to see less frequent behaviors such as location tracking, and then not so frequent behaviors that are, I guess, we don't see them that often, but when they see them, they can be quite strong and have a great impact to the big impact to the victim survivor. And for example, this could include account hacking and impersonation. Um, what we see is that most participants are not tech experts. They don't really necessarily know a lot about technology, and they seem to employ what they know how to use and is available to them. It's interesting how a lot of times behaviors seem to be learned incidentally within the relationship. For example, how to use a burglary alarm, or how to use a baby monitor and things like that. And for some time they might be used by both partners, but at some point these behaviors start becoming part of coercive control and are mainly used by the perpetrator. um, Although tech abuse is usually present both during and after the relationship, we tend to see that it tends to gain more prominence after separation. And a hypothesis I have right now is essentially that because all other means of reaching out to the victim are non-existent, so that's why they tend to go for things involving technology more, because sometimes they can still reach the victim survivor. And it's interesting because we had a few cases, so they weren't, I guess, part of the main pattern that we see. So we can call them outliers, where the perpetrator has significant technical expertise, and they could do quite complex technological things as part of their coercive control behavior. But this was not the norm. In terms of the kind of justifications they brought up for doing what they did. One category of justification was denying that it was abuse, not seeing it as this behavior as abusive or as coercive control, seeing it as routine behavior between intimate partner, denying or minimizing their own responsibility. kind of suggesting that both partners are responsible for this behavior, engage in this behavior, that they have decided mutually to engage in this. For example, we both decided that we want to have access to each other's phone. So what's wrong with it? A really important one that we tend to see a lot is tech abuse disguised as care. So essentially, um, understanding tech abuse as part of caring for their partner and their children, and wanting the best for them, and also some harm minimization, essentially considering tech abuse less serious or less pervasive or harmful than non-technological patterns of coercive control. Thinking that, for example, oh, it's not physical violence or it's not psychological abuse, kind of thinking it's kind of a less abusive thing. So this is pretty much it. And I welcome at this point any questions or feedback that you may have.
Thank you very much, Nikos, for setting the scene for today with an overview of different definitions of tech abuse and also for highlighting how diverse the field is. I think it is so important to understand each other's work to be more effective, and this definitely starts with the terminology.